Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Avalon Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ film festival. This is our 38th year, and we have an amazing lineup this year. As always, we have an extraordinary number of great short films. And 10 years ago, we started our horror night and a horror shorts program, which is, again, always one of my favorites. This year's program is extraordinary. We have some of the filmmakers to talk about their films and the projects. The Fright Collection horror short screens Friday, October the 3rd at 7:15 at the Midtown Arts Cinema. And why don't we meet some of our filmmakers? We're going to go, why don't we just go around the room? I'll call you and keep the same order and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your project. We'll start with Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim O'Leary. I am a filmmaker located in Los Angeles, and I like to make horror films.
Yeah.
My brand and production company is called Murder and Gay Stuff,
Hey,
and that's sort of the area. I try to give what it says on the tin, and my short film, The Holly King, is being screened here, so I'm very excited. And thanks for having me.
thank you. Kaitlin.
Hi, I'm Kaitlin Fontana. I'm a writer, director, podcast maker, and queer lady who lives in San Francisco. And my film Idyllwild is screening as part of the Fright Collection. I'm really excited to be represented alongside all these wonderful filmmakers. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Michael.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Schwartz. I'm a writer, director, and producer based in Los Angeles, originally from San Francisco, Caitlin. Most of my work is genre or comedy, and when I'm lucky, it's genre and comedy together. This one is Strangers on a Beach, which is a 1983 set erotic thriller noir with some horror overtones and undertones. And it's a privilege to have it amongst this crop of films as well.
Jordan.
Hey, Jordan Gustafson. I'm a queer filmmaker also in Los Angeles. Who would have thought that we exist? I'm super honored to be a part of this. My horror short is a musical romance, campy kind of smorgasbord of genre called Prom, Massacre. And so I'm super honored to be here and see all these other amazing movies.
Great. And Jonathan.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hammond. I'm a filmmaker. I'm also in Los Angeles, originally from San Diego, and before that, Illinois. I'm really honored to be here. I'm excited. My movie is Mass Cooking, and it's a horror movie about the horrors of Grindr.
I don't know. There's no horrors there. What do you mean?
Even I know there's horrors there.
Why don't we keep the same order and just talk a little bit about where you are right now in your film festival run?
Oh, the end. I think we premiered. I think we premiered here in LA at the Queer Hair Cinema. Recently, we were at Frameline, San Francisco-based film festival, the oldest queer film festival on the planet. And then we just bounced around a little bit, and I believe this is our last stop. So,
Great.
yeah, happy to come to a grinding halt with you people.
Idyllwild has had a really interesting festival run. We started our journey last December as part of the Another Hole in the Head film festival here in San Francisco, which is a wonderful, you guys are all nodding,
Yeah.
a wonderful, weird genre film festival here. And it's been making its way, bouncing around the country. And we just had an online premiere with Gilbert Baker Film Festival over the last month, which was really awesome. But this is one that I'm really excited about because my two lead actors are coming to Atlanta with me, and the three of us are going to see the film in the theater for the first time together. One of my actors has not actually seen it in full because she's one of those actors who doesn't like to watch herself. So it's going to be her first time seeing the film in its, finished form in the theater. So we have maybe a few more stops after this, but I'm counting Out on Film as sort of the big splashy premiere because of the actors being there. So
Well,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. So we were just at Film Out San Diego a few weeks ago. We were at Holly Shorts at the Chinese Theater here in LA right before that. Earlier in the summer, I went to Dublin to the Gays International LGBTQIA plus Film Festival, which was super fun. And we premiered at the beginning of the summer in New York at the Big Apple Film Festival. And it's been fun to do a lot more LGBT film festivals this time. My previous short, Snatched, which was also queer horror, didn't play a lot of queer festivals. It played more, regular film festivals. And so it's been really fun to engage in these conversations and be amongst all these different filmmakers with very queer films. So it's been fun.
We're on the flip side. I feel like at the start of ours, like we premiered in August. Yeah, August. It's September. In Portland at Queer Screams. And then this October we're all like each weekend we're kind of bouncing all over the place, which is exciting. But I'm very excited for Out on Film because we have had sort of similarly like been a lot of queer film festivals where I haven't played Queer Fest before.
Mhm.
And it's really nice to weirdly have a lot of community that you feel a part of and like see movies of your community. So I feel like that has been a really cool experience and getting to like meet people like both just watching and other filmmakers who are queer and just sort of see queer cinema writ large, especially like now,
Mm.
So
Right.
We are, I think, towards the beginning of our run. We premiered at Cannes, and the U.S. premiere was at Dances with Film, and we played L.A. Schwartz and Film Out, and quite a few. But this is, to be honest, the one I'm probably the most excited about.
Oh, thank you.
And my favorite thing is watching the audience watch the movie. It's very addictive.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I always loved horror films. I mean, my favorite film is Halloween, and I remember how the film changed my life. But I thought I was kind of alone as a queer man who liked horror. But as I found out, I'm not. Can you all talking about horror as a genre and why it's something that you've been attracted to?
Yeah, I'm trying to I have a story and I'm trying to figure out how to do this concisely in 60 seconds or less. So I'm just going to speed my way through this whole thing. I used to never watch horror films when I was a kid, and then I was too wimpy and too scared to watch them. And then my friend Wendy was like, "You have to watch Scream." I'm 45, so I was like right in high school, the age of the characters in Scream when it came out. So she's like, "Okay, this will be really fun." I was like, "All right." And so I was like, fine, all right. And she said, if you can get past the first 10 minutes of the movie, you'll like the rest because the first 10 minutes are the scariest. And I was like, okay. And they were, of course, first 10 minutes of Scream, sorry, almost swore, are terrifying. But it did. And then from there, it was just off to the races. I found that I really got addicted to the thrill of watching horror films because it felt like going on an amusement park ride. And, it had all that sort of fun adrenaline, but you were safe the whole time. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think like a lot of us, I won't speak for everybody, of course, but I think the relationship between queerness and horror is so specific and interesting, and I feel like it's a genre that allows us to explore the darker sides of our community and our brains and our minds and where we fit in society. So it's not surprising to me that more and more horror has a queer lens that it's being shot through. But I didn't start in horror really. I started in comedy. So I'm like one of those kind of people, like a Jordan Peele or a Zach Krieger, who actually came through the comedy side first. And then and always loved horror, but started making comedy. And then as I got better at making comedy, I started to see how the two overlap, and especially in terms of tone and pacing and all of that stuff. And I would say actually my films tend to be a little less obviously hitting on the genre of whatever they're supposed to be. So like my film is a horror film, but it's actually the wonderful filmmaker Nicole de Vanessas, who lives here in San Francisco, who runs Blood and Popcorn, another great horror film festival. She calls it a folklore horror. So that has kind of helped me like define how I talk about the film, because it's not, there isn't blood, there isn't everything sort of is a little more subtle. And so for me, it's like exploring the edges of something. And I think especially as a queer woman, the edges of queerness when you're a woman and a femme are a little bit less defined in society as a whole. So you're sort of always looking for like, where are the edges of this thing? So for me, finding my way into horror as a queer filmmaker was about kind of like not being directly in the like slasher space, not being in the scream space, but being more in this kind of like ambiguous space. And I would say like Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin was a big light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh, this is about so many other things. And so I try to make films in that vein, but I also love the garden variety horror slasher, you know, all that stuff too. So it's really fun, especially in these showcases, I find, to watch other filmmakers work, because I think we're all doing something totally unique, but we're all doing it towards the same thing, which is like talking about ourselves and who we are in the world, which is cool.
Great.
Cool. Jim, you made me think of that Queer for Fear series. If anyone watched that docu-series that sort of talked about the
Yeah.
history of this intersection, which was so fun to watch.
Mhm.
I love that Kaitlin sort of touched on all the different subgenres and all the different threads that horror can encompass. To me, at the end of the day, horror is a way for us to talk about what scares us, about our fears as a society, as a people. It's sort of unsurprising to me that a lot of queer people gravitate towards it, because there's a long history of fear in our community as well. I think for me, also horror and comedy are like the two visceral genres. Comedy promotes laughter, has a physical reaction. Horror makes you recoil and scream, and oftentimes we listen to our bodies first before we listen to our minds. So if we listen to our bodies recoiling in fear or having a laugh, we start to question it. And I think that's a really interesting place to be in, or to promote amongst an audience. You know, I'm a child of the 80s, so I grew up with a lot of Wes Craven, but also The Shining. I mean, I watched The Shining on repeat as a kid. And then certainly, like Tim mentioned, Scream was a huge turning point for me, because it felt like the first time we could tell a story and be in dialogue with the audience at the same time. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really, really neat trick. And so I guess the last thing I'll say is I love that I get to explore these different corners of our fears. That Strangers on a Beach for me is much more tinged with thriller, erotic thriller, noir, which has scares, which has horror elements, and I think should be included in the conversation, because it is about horrors, but it's sort of told in a slightly different genre encasing. So that's all to say, I sort of love, Jim, that you've curated all these different threads of this same conversation. It's fun to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like off that, you've all kind of so eloquently like touched on, I think, what makes horror so specific for queer filmmakers. And I feel like if I'll just speak to like this movie, I feel like for me, horror, what's so nice is that it's a genre that can then like, encompass kind of everything, and you can kind of throw so many different genres into horror to then find your own specific voice and what you feel. And so like I feel for this, coming at it from like a non-binary queer POV, like our film is sort of exploring like the presentation of gender in like the 50s and the 80s through like a mashup and musical sense. And I feel like for me, coming from a musical theater background, like a Sondheim loving kid, horror was always just something that the theatricality of it, the campiness of it, the elevated sort of like gore and scream queen like part of it I loved. And I feel like horror has always just been in the back of my brain like a way to express like both queerness, but then also like play into like entertainment and just like why we kind of like go to the theater to like feel something, and like both the theater, like movie theaters and theater. And I feel like horror is just sort of the best place in film to express that and get that like audience reaction. And I feel like as a filmmaker, there's nothing better than like seeing your audience react to something, whether it be laughing or crying, screaming, what have you. And so I feel like that's sort of like what I love about horror, and like this movie specifically with it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, yes to what everyone else said. I grew up like loving horror when I was allowed to see it, when it wasn't rated R. And my mom wouldn't let me watch anything rated R. So I could try to read all the Stephen King books. But honestly, my love, I mean, it's not really as intellectual as everybody else's. I mean, it is, but what I love making is the base. Like, I love having a sense of mystery in the film and a sense of the unknown. And I love just I come from a comedy space as well, but I love the thrill, like being scared, like a roller coaster. I mean, it's totally non-intellectual. That's what I love, just having that visceral reaction in the theater. And when it to me, it's not always. I love it when I see it, but it's not always done that well. So when it's done well, it's probably one of the most exhilarating things. And so when I watch any film, the things that most interest me are when you're moved, when you laugh, or when there's like incredible tension. When that's well, I'm in heaven.
Gotcha. Sounds like we're all big horror fans, which is great. I can't wait to meet some of you during the festival. Final question. Can you talk about the importance of having queer themes in your films, especially under this administration, which is a little traumatic and disturbing and uncertain? Why is it important to tell your stories and have queer characters front and center?
Wow. Yeah. We have an hour to talk about this.
We have 9 minutes left.
We each get an hour for this. Yeah, it's interesting because one thing that I don't think I ever made like specific decision to do this, but when I look at my work, um, the characters in who are the leads in my stories are gay, but but beyond that, like I don't feel like I tackle queer themes because I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like for me, because there are way better writers and filmmakers than I am who are tackling this material directly. And I feel like the best way that I can contribute to our community's um, representation is just to simply show gay characters as the leads that could easily be straight characters if it was a straight person writing it, but it's not. I'm writing it, so it's queer leads, and I feel like just having the presence of them and being able to see queer people in anything, in any genre, really. I write them in horror because I like to write horror. Um, but I think that's important, just the visibility and just the normalizing of, seeing queer people as the leads in relationships, and, basically going through a lot of the similar trials and tribulations that straight people do, just in a slightly different way.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and I love that, and I think making films and making art in this place, in this space, in this time is not everything, but it is something. And I think in order to continue to fight the fascism that is here, it's not at the doorstep, friends. It walked through a long time ago.
Yep.
And particularly, I think for those of us in marginalized communities and us, the folks in this room, potentially even less than some other marginalized communities. But just to say, like, it's been here. And so when you look back at the history of different cultures and different societies fighting fascism in different ways, because we're not the first to do this, art and creativity and film has been a big part of that fight for a really long time, for nearly 100 years. So we have a role to play. We're not the only role to play, and we shouldn't oversell our ability to change things, but we shouldn't undersell it either. And so when I'm making things, I think to Tim's point, it's about, these are just folks like you and me who are out here in the world doing their thing. And like the more we say that with our full chest, the more normalized our role becomes. But at the same time, I also think the pendulum needs to swing the other way, and we need to be able to like trouble the waters with our shit as well. And I did swear, sorry, Jim. To be able to introduce characters that are poking at the firmament because they are queer is important to me as well. People that are trying to change things because of their queerness, because of their perspective on the world. And I'll just talk about Idyllwild specifically for a second. I think one of the things I was trying to do in exploring queer themes in this story was trying to point at the fingers inward at the community as well, particularly communities of where we date each other and how we take things from each other and how we treat each other within the queer community, can be as scary, especially for I'm bisexual. There's the whole like man or bear, but it's also like, why just man? Like there's fears and dangers to explore within our communities that have less to do with like, if you take men out of the equation, then what happens to fear or danger? So, I think the more little specific corners we can poke some light into in this world with our stories, the more light floods in. So that's what I try to do with queer themes in my work. And I just am excited about all the different ways we're all doing that. I think that's really wonderful.
What a conversation.
Yeah.
I was inspired to write Strangers on a Beach because of the division I was actually sensing and feeling in my own communities, in my queer community, in my Jewish community. And then I started talking to Black friends and Latino friends and trans friends
Yeah.
who were feeling division in their communities as well. And that really scared me because if we're going to be divided amongst ourselves, how are we going to unite against the greater threat? That's what terrified me. And so I started thinking about times in recent history when these acts of violence were sowing division in communities, especially mine. And it took me back to my birthplace, my birth year, early 80s, San Francisco, at the early days of the AIDS crisis. And I think what a lot of people don't remember is that at that time, queer spaces were starting to get shut down due to the public health crisis, which was systematically moving queer people to move to the parks and the beaches, which is why it's Strangers on a Beach. And a few years earlier, there was a serial killer targeting gay men called the Doodler. And his first victim was also found on the beach. So I was sort of inspired by those two narratives in which to tell my story. And as a Jewish person, I grew up where the question was more important than the answer. And so for me, I wanted to make a film that posed questions and not answers in a hope and with an intention to have us reflect upon how some history finds itself repeating these days, and how if we're going to ever combat greater threats, we have to do so together. So that's what inspired my film.
Great.
Yeah, I feel like for us, a big thing, and just like with the horror genre writ large, is that like throughout the history of horror, like queer characters are often like relegated to the sidelines as like disposable villains or like the unhinged killer for like a jump scare, etc. And so like I feel for us, the whole big thesis was sort of to return agency to those characters and have them sort of spotlit in a way. And obviously, there's a conversation happening throughout it about queerness and sort of like allyship in a weird way. But a big thing was just sort of having these two queer characters in love front and center. And then I think like off of that, like especially like in this administration and everything, it was important to have like a trans lead and sort of have trans and queer talent behind the lens as well. Like a majority of my cast and crew is all queer, which was really cool to do and feel that sort of like sense of community on set, because I feel like when everyone is working towards something and we all are from a community, it lends itself to the screen as well. But especially I think in this time, it's just important to keep telling the stories and like pushing the narratives and not sort of buckle to what said administration would desire and like what people think that they want to see. Is that we have to just continue to tell our stories, otherwise they just won't get told.
Yeah, I think given the current administration, creating queer art and showing up to queer spaces is an act of defiance, and I'm here for it. My mission as a filmmaker is I'm a cineast and a huge film lover, and I have been my whole life, and I make movies that sort of put. I'll take a genre or a kind of a movie and put queer characters where normally there were straight in the leads. So 2 movies ago, it was a movie like a Reservoir Dogs type movie where they were switched out with the gay characters. I have another movie that's kind of A Room with a View, and the Cecil character is clearly gay, but I'm not allowed to be gay, so no, like it's a time travel and be gay. And then this one, it's I want to see the gay characters get murdered like they do in the straight people in other movies, and it's to me that's political because it's representation, and that is pretty much what I want to make. And I do think that film it has a strong force on society. I mean, these are shorts, so that probably won't get as widely seen as a theatrical movie. But an example would be in like I know when A Few Good Men came out, the sales of Yoo-Hoo shot up. And when Ghost came out, my mother ran out and got Demi Moore's haircut. So I mean, those are physical ways how you can see how film affects people in society. Yeah, you can't gauge what happens inside, with their heart and minds, but you can see what happens physically with those kinds of things. So I mean, I know it's going to change the world, but it's going to change something. So it's not just my great love in life, but also my mission.
Oh, that's great. Thank you all so much for sharing your films with us this year. Thank you for taking the time to do this. The Fright Collection horror shorts screens at on Film Friday, October 3rd at 7:15 at the Midtown Arts Cinema, followed by a brief streaming window. Some of the films you can find are Strangers on a Beach, Prom Party Massacre, The Holly King, Idyllwild, and Masculine Looking. This is an extraordinary set of films. I'm very, very proud of this. I look forward to having you here, some of you here at Out on Film very, very shortly. Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
So much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Great to meet everybody.
Nice to
Great
meet
meeting
you.
you guys too.
Bye, guys.
Bye.